Hi everyone, Armine Bazikyan here, and this month we wanted to help you answer a question that we get asked all the time is, should I bring my kids to my estate planning meeting when I come into the office? So this is a really good question, and adult parents, parents of adult children will ask us all the time. Parents of young children will ask us this question all the time, so we wanted to jump in and help you answer them. This question is kind of unique in the sense that, it depends on family dynamics and whatnot, but we wanted to at least put together this video and give you some tips and tricks and some things to consider before you make this decision to take your kids into the attorney meeting for your estate plan. So let's jump in and talk about children that are minors, meaning young children. Should you take them into the meeting with you? So I always, first of all, our office is always welcoming of young children. You're always welcome to bring your little kids into our office. You don't have to find a babysitter. We're more than happy to entertain them while we do our estate planning meeting. But there are some things I want you to take into consideration. If they're going to be sitting in the estate planning meeting with you, or if we're doing the meeting via Zoom and they're in the room with you, I want you to consider some very harsh questions that the attorneys are going to discuss with you and ask you that you may not want your children to hear. So for example, if I'm asking about end-of-life wishes or distributions at death, and I'm using the word death, and I'm saying if you pass away, if you die, we don't necessarily maybe want the kids to hear that, especially if they're really young, like 5 or 8 years old, and they're not really understanding the context of what's happening and what you're doing. It might be really, really traumatic. So I want you to consider this when you're deciding to have your minor children in the room with you while you're doing your estate planning meeting, because I think it all depends on the family, and it also depends on the kid. Some kids might not pay attention, and some might be overly traumatized by the question. So be very cautious of that. If we're talking about adult children, whether you want to take your grown children into a meeting with you, this one is a little bit more difficult. It really depends on the family dynamic. It depends on what you're planning on doing with your assets, and their reaction and how it may or may not be positive from their perspective. So, but generally speaking, there are some really good reasons why you would want your kids involved in the estate planning process, but then there are also some really bad reasons for involving them. And that's kind of what we wanted the purpose of this video to be. So on the positive end, always good to have your kids, adult kids, involved in the estate planning process, because number one, they're not going to be surprised by anything when you're gone, right? They were involved in the process and they knew what your desires and wishes were. What you told the attorney came out of your mouth. They were there during the meeting. They experienced it. So there's no surprises, which is really good, because if we can eliminate the element of surprise after someone dies, it usually lowers the probability of a lawsuit happening. It actually it allows the kids to know what to expect and not be surprised, and therefore they're not suspicious of the other people involved or their other siblings. So having them all in the room when you're talking to the attorney is a good idea if you want to make sure that they're aware that this is your decision. It eliminates, again, the element of surprise. The second reason is that it actually allows them an opportunity to jump in and ask questions to the attorney. Depending on how you're structuring it, they might put in their perspective that you may not have considered. There might be questions related to grandchildren that your children want to be involved in making those decisions. So you might want to take their input or their opinion into consideration. So it's always a good idea because it gives them an opportunity to ask questions. And then also, other than surprise and asking questions, it gives them an opportunity to meet your attorney and kind of know who did the documents for you, where to go if something should happen. Establish a little bit of a relationship so that they're not just starting their research at the time that you're sick or have passed away. So those are kind of 3 reason-ish points that I'm trying to make on the positive side. On the negative flip side, depends again on the family dynamic, but on the negative side, I do see the client's opinions and desires being completely changed or skewed when the children are in the room. There are things that parents will tell me during a meeting that's private that they will not dare say in front of their adult children. They don't feel free to express themselves. And for me personally, as the attorney, sometimes that's one of the reasons I don't like to have kids involved in the meeting, is because of that. It closes up the client. They don't tell me things that they want to tell me because they don't want to hurt the feelings of their kids, right? And this happens all the time. So one of the reasons is that you're not free to express yourself the way that you would if your kids weren't in the room, because they're there and you don't want to hurt their feelings and you don't want to make anyone mad. The second reason is that you might want privacy. Maybe you don't want them to know what you're doing with your assets. And this is especially true if you are distributing or giving away your estate in an unequal way. Maybe you're giving more to one child versus another. Maybe you're favoring one child over another. So you may not want them to know that during your lifetime because it'll affect the relationship they have with you. So you might want privacy, and that's why you might not want your children involved on the meeting. So those are just some of the things to consider on the negative side. Generally speaking, as a general rule of thumb, and this is especially true with our office, and if you've called us, you know, we will either allow all children in the room or none of them at all. So if you're planning on taking only one of your kids and leaving the other two at home, I would highly recommend against that. It creates another storm of legal issues for the future for the kids, litigation issues. So my recommendation is, if you do want your children involved in the estate planning process, take all of them or take none of them, okay? It's kind of like an all or none rule that we have. We want either all of them to be involved and all of them to know what's happening, or we want none of them there. We don't want it to appear that one of them brought you and influenced you and you did things that were favoring that one child that was in the room versus the others who didn't attend the meeting. So you have to be very careful with how the meeting may be perceived in the future, looking back. So be very, very cautious. I always recommend an all or none rule, and it's worked out really well for my clients. But again, going back, this is a family dynamic issue. Some kids are closer to their parents. Some parents feel closer to certain children and they might want them versus not having others at the meeting. So again, it's a purely family dynamic question, and it's whatever you feel comfortable with. However, those are our suggestions to make the process a little bit easier for everybody involved, but also for it to be legally clean and not create any possible conflict issues in the future. So if you'd like to consult with our office, with or without your kids, all or none rule with our office, feel free to contact us and we'd be happy to set up a free consultation for you. Have a good one. Bye.